This video is brought to you by Haley Star Bad Kitty, a magic-fueled sci-fi adventure that's an enjoyable read for all ages. Link in the description. Greetings, salutations, and other big words. My name's Ethan, my handle is Wrangler. Welcome to Frequency Studios. Today, we're taking a good look into Private American, the graphic novel by Mike Baron and Richard Bonk. A fun read with action and a bit of humor sprinkled in. It's available in both physical and digital copies. The link is in the description, so you can check it out. If you haven't read it yet and don't like spoilers, then pause the video, click that link in the description, and grab a copy. The rest of this video will still be here when you're done, I think. If you're watching this on YouTube, we all know they could be a little fickle. Anyway, if you're still here, great. Let's get to it. The story opens by a southern border in Texas where coyotes are smuggling people into the United States. But these guys aren't just coyotes. They're heavily armed, and they're hauling fentanyl. Here we find one of the coyotes, a douchebag named Efradio, standing menacingly over a woman on her knees. Speaking in Spanish, the coyote is telling her, "Come on, let's go," and she's begging him not to do this. He's saying, "You knew this would be part of the deal." Even an older woman came running up, shouting that he promised he wouldn't. So this dude backhands her, smacking her aside while dragging the other woman behind some bushes, where he already has a mattress set up, giving us that sickening realization that this is business as usual for Efradio. He throws her down on the mattress and starts to force himself on her when he's suddenly yanked back up to his feet and his throat is slashed by this guy. Wielding a knife, he's covered in body armor that has the Gadsden flag's rattlesnake displayed on the mid-torso. And if you ever wondered why the Timber Rattler was chosen for this flag...
You know, the fascinating thing with the female timber rattlesnake is that they may only reproduce 2-3 times in their entire life. I got another one between my legs.
That's right. Any critter that can get Steve Irwin of all people to make that face is not one to be trifled with. Rest in peace, good sir. Earth misses you. Meet Marcos Zamora. Don't know who he is? Well, the blurb is kind enough to fill us in. He's a second-generation Cuban-American, a veteran, and more patriotic than most Americans. When he can no longer ignore the lawlessness on his doorstep, he takes action, anonymously, to stop as many murderers, traffickers, and terrorists as he can. We also learn in this issue that he was dishonorably discharged. Apparently, he caught some guy beating the hell out of a dog, so he shot him. Well, I'm sure anyone who's not a psychopath would agree with the sentiment that probably would count as a kind of conduct unbecoming of a U.S. service member. Now he spends his time doing things like this. He saves this lady from being raped. Holy crap, I just had an epiphany. The bad guy tries to take the pussy. The good guy stops him. So that's why it's called a save the cat moment. Back on the other side of the bushes, Efradio's two associates are standing watch with rifles, keeping their human cargo in line and starting to get impatient as they wait for their turn. But then Marcos pops out of nowhere with his knife. He's quick, he's precise, and he just wrecks them both before either could get a shot off. He turns to the folks being trafficked, points out a glow in the distance and says, "See that light? That's Border Patrol. Go to them and they will help you." He then takes the smuggler's guns and the fentanyl and goes to leave. The woman he saved first comes up to him and asks him in English, "Who are you?" That's when Marcos says, "Just a private American, ma'am. Just a private American."
He said it! He said it!
Hopping in his blue Ford pickup truck, he drives off into the night, arriving at his home a short time later. When he opens his front door, he finds this guy sitting inside and chomping down on some pizza. Meet Gustavo, a.k.a. Gus. Gus is Marcos' best friend, and he's here because he wants to join Marcos out in the field. It's this scene where we learn of his discharge and a hint of his motivating factors. Gus also mentions that his brother Christopher is going to want in on their operations, but Marcos flatly refuses. Why? We don't know, but he's just not interested at all. Here, the story shifts to Ciudad Juarez, a city in Mexico where some men are discussing the recent events. They mention a Fradio by name and are trying to determine who it probably was that killed their agents. Who these guys are, we aren't told, but we're given the idea that they could be much higher up in the food chain than we might have suspected, because we learn here that not only do they have many plants in Border Patrol, but they even got the freaking Knights Templar on their payroll. They come to the conclusion that this is probably the work of an outsider and decide to contact the guy they refer to as Vibora. Having no clue what that word meant, I put it in Google Translate and it said Choice. Yep, this guy goes by the moniker Choice. His real name is Ferdinand de la Garza. This guy was Guatemalan Special Ops, and he receives a call. 2 days later, at the water in Big Bend National Park, 6 Persian dudes come rowing themselves to shore in a couple of inflatable rafts. And these aren't the cool kind of Persians with genies and magic carpets. Nope, these are the obnoxious kind that bring C4 and fentanyl. And they're packing some major heat. As they're all stepping out of the boats, a herd of wild boar comes rushing out of the woods. Having a harsh cultural aversion to swine, these guys react with revulsion and bullets. But while they were focused on the pigs, Marcos and Gus flanked them, lined up their shots, and mowed them down. They collected the weapons, the C4, the fentanyl, and they got out of there. Later, their activities are being covered on the news. The reporter refers to the Persian drug smugglers as Afghani refugees and says that Border Patrol is suspecting some Texas-based white supremacists. Cutting back to Ciudad, the organization whose name we still don't know is also discussing the matter and wondering how the Afghans got there without them knowing about it. That's when De La Garza, the Vibora, shows up, sporting his Hawaiian shirt and shades, looking like Magnum P.I. They go over the recent happenings at the border, trying to determine if this was all the work of the same party. After they go through the known details, Vibora suggests sending just the shipments in the next run, no migrants. It then cuts to a bar where the mule team is discussing their next job. Now, there are these 2 guys sitting in the background listening, who I assume are Marcos and Gus. But standing right outside in full Magnum mode is De La Garza. He's watching when they leave the building, but someone sets off a pack of firecrackers and startles the crap out of everybody. Then they're gone. I'm not sure if it was Marcos and Gus that dropped them on purpose or if it was some random kid goofing off, but it allows them to walk away without being noticed by anybody. The scene cuts to Marcos and Gus watching a jeep crossing some shallow waters at the border via a drone. They decide not to attack until they're certain that this is who they think it is, so while they're waiting for an opportunity to confirm, they started to have a chat about their dating life. Gus held up his phone to show Marcos a picture of his last date, but Marcos' eyes were instead drawn to the little red dot on Gus's back that was moving towards his armpit. Marcos shouts at him to get down, but the shot is taken and Gus is hit. Marcos dives for cover behind a rock as the second shot comes at him. By the time he's able to come back up with his own rifle, De La Garza is riding away on a dirt bike. So he jumps back over to help Gus, but the shot was an instant kill. His best friend is gone. The only thing he can do is pull Gus's body up and over his shoulders and carry him back to the truck. The next day takes us to a ranger station, where one of the rangers is showing a drone to a man sitting at a desk and telling him that it was given by Border Patrol. It's also here that we learn what Marcos has been doing with the fentanyl. He's been dropping it off on the rangers' doorsteps instead of bringing it to the feds. For this reason, the rangers are referring to Marcos as the Fentanyl Sentinel. The guy behind the desk asked the ranger to try tracking down the owner of the drone and to keep this under his hat, to which he agrees. But as soon as he steps out of the office, a man named Agent Witt is standing there. Standing. I guess you could call it that, but the Fed looks like a pipsqueak next to the ranger. Anyway, the ranger is surprised to see Agent Witt and even asks him what the Feds are doing here. With no answer forthcoming, he takes his leave, but Witt is eyeballing that drone in his hand. Coming back to Marcos, he now has to stand before Gus's parents, look them in the eye, and tell them what happened to their son. After what must be one of the worst kinds of conversations to have, they hold a very private funeral in the backyard. Back in Ciudad, De La Garza is reporting to the... We still don't know who these guys are, other than they love this Gomez Imports place, and it's in Mexico. Wouldn't that sign be in Spanish? Let me look this up. How to say imports in Spanish? Importaciones? Okay, yeah, I'd shorten that to English too. But this Mexican Illuminati are not too happy with Mr. De La Garza over the fact that one of them got away. They even consider not paying him at all. But his response was pretty much, "That's fine, I'll finish the job anyway." They're like, "Why would you do that?" To which he says it's a matter of pride. They counter, asking him how he plans to find this guy, and that's when Mr. De La Garza lights up a stogie, takes a puff, and informs them that he placed a tracking device on Marcos's pickup truck. And speaking of Marcos, he has Gus's parents trying to convince him to stay the night and lay low, but he declines, saying he has too much to do. But where does he go after leaving? A bar called Farley's. There he is, trying to drink some of the pain away. A lady shows him interest inside the bar, while De La Garza selects his weapons outside. He's not in Magnum mode this time. Gone are the Hawaiian shirt and shades. This time he's rocking a black shirt and a very sharp knife. Marcos eventually comes outside the bar to see a stray dog that hangs around. He stops and pets him because we all know how Marcos is with dogs, and the pooch is more than happy to be receiving his attention. But the dog suddenly starts barking at something behind Marcos, and he spun around just in time to intercept De La Garza. He lands a kick in his assailant's gut, and before De La Garza could counter, the dog clamped down on his wrist with a nasty bite. De La Garza resorted to slashing the dog's snout with a knife to get free, and took off as a crowd of onlookers poured out of the bar. The crowd rushed De La Garza, and he made a hasty exit while Marcos tended to the dog. With quite the stroke of luck, it turns out that the chick he was talking to is a veterinarian. The bartender lets them take the dog inside to tend to his wounds. By daybreak, the dog was properly bandaged and riding shotgun in Marcos's truck. Marcos decides to name the dog Gus, and while driving starts to wonder how De La Garza found him. That's when his eyes pop open wide and he brings the truck to a screeching halt. Searching through the truck, he finds the tracker, breaks it, and leaves it in the dust on the side of the road. Meanwhile, at the Department of Homeland Security, we have 3 people, who are not yet named, in a room addressing the issues at the border. They know the Rangers have the drone, probably due to Agent Witt, and they want it. They even consider the Texas Rangers to be a rogue organization for not being under their control, and the head honcho of this group says to get that drone. By the way, see this lady here in the photo on the wall behind him?
Hello, miss.
We'll see her one more time before the book's over, but just know that she's a prominent and important figure. These guys waste no time. Somebody goes full cat burglar, snagging the drone, and it was at their headquarters within 8 hours. They explore options for tracking down the original owner while watching the footage of the Jeep. Now, this is the head honcho from earlier, as well as the woman, but the guy with the glasses is nowhere to be seen here. Bossman says that he wants to put the special team together to go after these white supremacists, and that this is a need-to-know basis, so it's only the 2 of them, the team itself, and the president. Secret agent lady pushes back a bit here, thinking that letting the president know is a bad idea, to which he says that she'll forget in an hour. Yep, that's right. This hottie right here is the President of the United States. So Secret Agent Lady pushes again, reminding Bossman that Chief of Staff Mordecai won't forget. Bossman says that Mordecai knows to keep his mouth shut. He then goes on to say that the team must reflect their diversity and values. Why does this matter to him so much? We don't know yet. I figure either he's drank the Kool-Aid or it's tied to something even bigger. But it's kind of odd that things are to the point where Secret Agent Lady needs to ask permission to have a white guy in the team. Bossman, who's about as white guy as it gets, allows her one, and asks who she has in mind, to which she says the guy who got them the drone to begin with, Agent Witt. Marcos gets home to find a guy sitting in his house and chomping down on some pizza. Meet Chris, Gus's brother, and he's here to honor his brother's memory by continuing the mission. Marcos tries to dissuade him, but Chris insists that Gus knew what he was getting into, and so does he. He says, "I'm a big boy, I can handle myself." So Marcos sits down with him and they start going over plans. Why Marcos didn't want him involved before, we still don't know. It's made clear in this conversation that Chris is indeed quite capable, but Marcos really doesn't want anything bad to happen to him, and I don't think it's just because of losing Gus. I get the idea that there's a bit more of a protective streak in Marcos when it comes to Chris that was present before Gus died. Marcos says he needs to find another drone so he could keep recording what they do and get the video out, because the media won't cover things from their perspective. This is where Chris starts asking questions as to the point. He's like, "Do you think putting that video out there is going to convince the government to start listening to the will of the people?" And he goes on for a moment about political corruptions and things that are too far gone. He's pretty much blackpilled about the direction of the nation. And when Marcos calls him out on it, he just shrugs and says that his ex used to call him Eeyore. Back at the Mexican Illuminati headquarters, they're all wondering what had become of Ferdinand de la Garza and are now considering calling someone else. A bald guy says that they should sanction Vibora and send his man, who never fails. One of the others pointed out that Vibora never fails either, and yet, here we are. To which Baldy replies, "My man is standing behind you right now." The other three turn around with their guns drawn to see that there is indeed a guy standing right there, and holy derpface, how'd this dude's eyes get like that?
Shadow me.
Screw it. I'm calling him Dirtback Mountain from here on out. So Baldy tells them to lower their guns, and they're asking how he got in here. Why they're not asking about what happened to his eyes is beyond me, but maybe we're better off just not knowing. Baldy instructs Dirtback Mountain to turn, and when he does, he disappears from view. Baldy goes into a technobabble explanation about bending or refracting light to simulate invisibility. I didn't think there were any sci-fi elements in here, but there you go. Unless... Are light-bending suits a real thing?
According to Quora, apparently, yes. CNN. Scientists have long explored how manipulating light waves might be at the root of building an invisibility cloak. In 2006, theoretical physicist John Pendry was one of the first scientists to propose using lenses to bend light to make an object appear invisible.
Huh. Well, what do you know? You hear that, Yautja? We can do it too. What do you got to say to that, huh?
You have made me very angry. Very angry indeed.
Baldy goes on to say that they are manufacturing these suits at a price tag of 500,000 smackers apiece. This is where one of the dudes demands that Baldy tell Dirtback Mountain to give him the suit. I don't know why. This dude is twice the size of Derpy and would never fit into it. The assertive guy does try to challenge Dirtback Mountain directly and gets knocked on his ass for it. After tensions settle, they sit down to discuss their next move. Baldy and Dirtback Mountain say that Vibora has to be eliminated because he knows too much, but the other three are still somewhat going to bat for him. Derpy himself says next time to use the Knights Templar instead, but in the meantime, they have the tracking information from De La Garza's efforts, and Derpy is planning to go to Gus and Chris's parents and make them talk. From there, we go to an auto shop being used as a front for some shady pharmaceuticals. A guy driving a Jeep stops by to drop off a shipment of pills. He comes back outside singing Don't Cry For Me Argentina, hops back into the Jeep and gets bit by a poisonous snake. As that's happening, Dirtback Mountain slides out from underneath the Jeep with a tracking device and a wicked smile. Now frankly, I'm not sure what's happening here. Is this the same Jeep from the previous border crossing? Is this De La Garza? Kinda looks like him, but he's tough to spot without his Magnum PI shirt. But whatever the deal is, Chris and Marcos are already moving Chris's parents to a safe house. There, they mention that another incursion is expected around 10 p.m. on Wednesday near Langtree, and after making sure that the older couple is secure, head back for Marcos' place to prepare. Here, Marcos hands Chris a pair of glasses, and these are some fancy tech. They're night vision, they take pictures, yet are no bulkier than a pair of safety glasses. Chris asks the obvious question, where did you get these from? Well, he got them from a package on his front steps, along with a note from somebody who goes by Cicero, knows what they're doing, and says he's on their side. They don't know who he is, but he knows who and where they are, so they figure if this Cicero guy wanted to be a problem for them, he already could have. So they take the two new pair of glasses and head out to where they expect the next crossing. Right on time, an all-terrain vehicle with tank treads comes rolling through the shallow water carrying three men, armed to the teeth. So Chris points a rocket launcher at them and fires. They return fire and then abandon the damaged vehicle, and one of the three gets killed in the process as they take the fight to the shore. Now, even though Marcos and Chris got the drop on them, these guys do manage to put up a fight, but they had these guys over barrel from the get-go and the other two go down. The next morning, Border Patrol finds the bodies, with Punisher logos slapped on them for good measure. The news reports that 3 members of the Mexican Special Forces were murdered, that the Punisher skull has been identified by the Department of Homeland Security as a symbol of white supremacy, and that they will hunt these supremacists down. The news broadcast switches to the White House, where the President herself is addressing the situation. We finally get her name, and it's President Mankiller.
Hello, nurse.
Now that I think about it, she kind of looks like Salma Hayek.
Right now, just okay. Jesus Christ.
Yes, I am. She gives the usual generic type of statement that you'd expect, saying that there's no place for extremism and that this will be handled. When she turns to leave the podium, this guy comes up, I'm guessing he's her press secretary, as a reporter asks the obvious question, What were the Mexican Special Forces doing in our country? And this guy's like, yeah, we're done. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Marcos and Chris are laughing their asses off hearing them say it was white supremacists. But their laughter is interrupted by a ringing phone, and when Marcos answers it, the guy on the other end identifies himself as Roland Pergament, a.k.a. Cicero, the guy that sent them the night vision glasses. He says that he knows who they are, where they are, and that they are going to need backup. So a chopper picks them up and brings them to a mansion near San Antonio where they meet Roland Pergament with his dog Buster in person. He tells Marcos that he's been watching him since his discharge and that there's even a video of him shooting the dog beater going around the internet. He tells them that one of the people that Marcos saved posted a video on Facebook, and Pergament's facial recognition software identified him. He goes on to tell them a bit of his background as a second-generation American, what his motivations are, and then mentions how every action has an equal and opposite reaction. This is where he segues to a guy named Rupert Mannheim, a wealthy individual who built his empire by manipulating currencies, causing bank crashes, and buying up all the assets for cheap. Now, he uses his power and wealth to finance and defund the police movement. So I'm assuming that Pergament is doing what he's doing as a counter to Mannheim. But a guy that works for Pergament, named Shlomo, comes walking in and Pergament introduces him to Marcos and Chris. At this point, due to Gus's death, Pergament already knows Chris's motivations. So he turns to Marcos and asks about his. He gives his typical answer of, a man can't just sit around. So Pergament shows them some footage, and it's from their last operation. Marcos asks where he got that video, to which Pergament replies that it's the video from the drone that they lost. It was stolen from the Texas Rangers and is now in the hands of the NSA. But he's got a guy on the inside who snagged them a copy of the footage. He goes on to explain that he wants all their work recorded so he could keep releasing it to the public and let them see what's really going on at the border with the drug smuggling and the abuse of the migrant caravans that end up being trafficked. But just the two of them are not enough to get the job done, which is why he initially told them that they need backup. Pergament wants to put together a team and have Marcos lead, to which he replies, I'm just a private American.
There it is! There it is!
After a bit more chit-chat about political corruption, Marcos agrees to take the job. Then Pergament asks Chris, who answers with a question of his own. What does it pay? Long story short, they're both in. Hired on as security consultants, and if you were wondering, it pays $10,000 a month.
Do you accept cash?
This is when Pergament dubs their group the Deplorables. Yeah, even Chris is like, huh? And crumbs of what he was munching on tumble down his coveralls. Wait a minute. Let me go back and see something. Here. Jeez, this dude's always stuffing his face. Getting a tour of the place, Pergament tells them that he saw the writing on the wall years ago, and he's been preparing ever since. He brings them to the garage where there's a small variety of tactical ATVs and a smorgasbord of high-end firearms. He's even got rooms set up for them, so commuting shouldn't be too much of a hassle. But later that night, something gets Buster's attention. Outside, an unsuspecting guard continues on with his patrol while everybody's favorite wonky-eyed midget ninja Dirtback Mountain makes an appearance and starts looking around. Dude, that's not how you're supposed to look around. No, that's... Man, looking at that makes my eyes hurt. How do you see? Buster's anxiousness wakes Pergament up, who immediately tries to reassure his dog that everything's fine. But Dirtback Mountain is on the move. He sneaks into the garage, climbs under one of the vehicles, and I'm not sure if what he was intending to plant a tracer or a bomb or something, but whatever it was, it quickly becomes irrelevant when a pair of hands grabs him by the ankles and Marcos yanks him out from under the truck. Derpy launches Marcos back with a kick. They both scramble to their feet and Marcos draws his pistol, but Derpy vanishes as Marcos opens fire. The two of them scuffle for a moment when Dirtback Mountain activates his suit and goes into Yautja mode. The gunfire brought everybody else running. Marcos tells Pergament that he shouldn't be out here right now and informs him that the guy has a light-bending suit. Pergament's like, a what? Which surprises me. The guy who sends state-of-the-art night vision goggles as a care package to vigilantes hasn't heard of this tech before. So Marcos explains it to him. Luckily, Pergament is no slouch in the tech department himself, and they run inside to the surveillance room and shift all the monitors to infrared. They can see him on screen, and Pergament comments that he's never seen anything like this. Don't worry, buddy. I don't think he can see all that much either. I don't know if this is out of recognition or just commenting on his derpiness, but one of them blurts out, "Walleye." Buster starts going spastic near one of the windows, and then rushes outside. Marcos and Chris go running out after him. When Buster gets to the trees at the end of the driveway, he comes flying back out with a yelp. Apparently, Dirtback Mountain hasn't seen that video going around that Pergament mentioned earlier, or else he would have realized that you don't hurt dogs in front of this guy. As soon as they saw the distortion in the air, Marcos and Chris opened fire, and... Which brings the saga of Dirtback Mountain to an end. Dirtback Mountain, page 34 through page 67. Rest in peace. We will always remember your face. Well, more like be haunted by it. Yeesh. Good riddance. We cut to another location where we find the Mexican Illuminati meeting with some guy wearing pajamas. Baldy is here, so is the dude with the receding hairline, and I'm not sure if this big guy is the one who got knocked around by Derpy or if he's hired muscle for the weirdo in pajamas, but they're all reporting to him as he sits there with a bit of a crazed look on his face and covering his nuts. Look at him, protecting his junk in every shot. But this isn't somebody to screw with. I'm sure this photo of himself that he affectionately placed on the end table suggests he can at least aim a gun. He's got contacts in the FBI and Justice Department who are assuring him that our favorite vigilante duo will be quickly neutralized. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mannheim, and it seems that he's the shot caller for the Mexican Illuminati. One of the things that they're discussing is they need to make sure that the vigilantes are not captured, but killed. Because if they ever got to trial, the things that they could say would bury them deep. Mannheim says that the fentanyl sentinel isn't the problem, Pergament is. And that's when somebody walks in and hands Mannheim a piece of paper with some information on it. Looks like Chris's parents used a debit card, and now they have a good idea where they are. So not only is that a problem, but no sooner do we get rid of Dirtback Mountain's ugly mug than to have it replaced by this nightmare fuel. I mean, look at this guy. He looks like a psycho fixing to feed somebody to a rabid bear.
I feast on your fears.
Luckily, Pergament has his own contacts and sources within the government, and he gets word that they're looking for Chris's parents. So Pergament sends a team to move them to another safe location, then gets word to the Sinalda cartel that the house was abandoned and can be used indefinitely. So, a couple days later, when the cops bust down the door, they find a couple of cartel dudes guarding a stash of drugs. It was the two of them versus an entire SWAT team, and it went about as well as you'd expect. The deplorables are watching the coverage on the news when Pergament again asks Marcos why he does this. And again, Marcos says a man can't just sit around. But Pergament presses him this time, saying there's more to it than that. Marcos finally concedes and starts telling him that the corruption has been running so rampant that they're now seeing the power of government being leveraged to silence and arrest people just for openly disagreeing with those in power, while drugs are being run through his area. And he knows that screaming about it would just get him silenced, but not speaking up means they'll just eventually come for him too. Might as well give him a good reason to try. Now, you might say that this isn't a good enough reason to handle things in the manner he has been, and in the real world, you'd be right. It's fun to watch someone do this in a fictional setting, but this would be straight up vigilantism and kinda undercuts a lot of the principles of due process that make up our constitutional republic. But that's probably why he's coming across in this scene the way he is. People of his philosophy tend to value law, order, and due process, but his faith in the system is decimated. You can gather from what he's saying here that he's probably more black-pilled than he lets on. So, in desperation, he goes out to protect those values. But how far does that go? At what point are the methods that you're using to protect your values actually betraying them? But on the other hand, it's those very methods that saved all these people. So how do you determine where you draw that line? And that's probably why he looks so conflicted here. At least that's what I'm getting out of this, but I don't really know what the author's intentions were. I could be reading into this wrong. Pergament says, well, if they're going to eventually come for you no matter what, then let's make it difficult for them in the meantime. Let's aim higher. Marcos looks at him and asks, cartel leaders? But Pergament just says, higher. And that's where the issue ends. We still have some questions. Questions like, what's the deal with Boss Man at the Department of Homeland Security? How high up is Mannheim's reach? Is the Mexican Illuminati just a collection of cartels, or are they connected to something bigger? President Hadi, what's your number? Did Buster survive? And was that De La Garza that got bitten by the snake? Honestly, I hope he survived the bite, because if he didn't, that would be anticlimactic and a wasted opportunity. I mean, that's the dude that killed Gus, and I'm hoping for a face-to-face confrontation between him and Chris. There's all sorts of potential for character development with that scenario. What did you guys think of the first issue of Private American? Let me know. Are you looking forward to the second issue? I don't know when it's supposed to come out, but when it does, I'll probably give that one a coverage video as well. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. The link to Private American is in the description. Give it a click so you can get your hands on a copy. If you enjoyed this presentation, hit the like, and if you didn't, I appreciate you stopping by. I'll see you next time, and God bless.